I gave 14 years of my life to that company. I bled for them, built half their systems from scratch, and trained the people who now pretend I never existed. I'm not here to complain. I'm here to tell you how I walked away before they even realized I was the only thing holding them together, and how, in trying to erase me, they handed me the blueprint for their collapse. My name's Lana Ortiz. I'm 43. I live in Austin, Texas, and until last spring, I was the senior project director at a boutique design firm that went from scrappy startup to award-winning darling of the high-end interiors world. I was there before we even had a coffee machine. Back when the conference room was just 3 folding chairs and a whiteboard balanced on cinder blocks. The CEO, Mark, used to joke I was the firm's Swiss Army knife. I handled client onboarding, managed workflows, wrote training docs, and even crawled under desks to reset the damn routers when the Wi-Fi cut out. It was chaotic, but I loved it. Because it was ours. Because back then, it felt like we were building something together. And then things got shiny. By year 8, we were featured in Architectural Digest. By year 10, we had a wait list. And by year 12, Mark had a downtown penthouse and started saying things like, "We need to modernize the energy in here." Translation: he hired his 25-year-old daughter, Kelsey. Now listen, I have no beef with legacy. Family business? Cool. But when someone shows up with 0 industry experience and gets walked into a creative strategy title without ever touching a client file? That's not legacy. That's theater. At first, I tried to play along. She was young, she needed guidance. I gave her templates, sat in on her pitch decks, even rewrote one of her proposals at midnight to keep a project from falling through. She thanked me by telling her dad I had rigid energy and was blocking innovation. So you can imagine how it felt to walk into a quarterly planning meeting and see her sitting at the head of the table. No one told me she'd be leading it. No one told me I'd be demoted to technical oversight. Mark just looked at me and said, "Lana, I think it's time you focused more on internal process. Kelsey's bringing a fresh lens to client direction." I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. Instead, I nodded. And that afternoon, I started quietly pulling copies of every system I'd built over the last decade. Because if they were planning to erase me, they had no idea what I'd been protecting them from all these years. They thought the ship sailed itself. They didn't see the holes I'd patched, the code I'd rewritten at 2 a.m. when vendors' APIs failed, or the rush projects I salvaged when the junior team forgot a deliverable. And worst of all, they didn't know I was the only one who ever caught the bug. Yeah, that bug. The one in our custom materials database. The one that, if left unfixed, would start miscalculating inventory across 3 different client platforms. I patched it once. Quietly. Because at the time, I believed in the company. But now? Now, I was sitting on a time bomb they didn't even know existed. And they just handed the keys to someone who couldn't read a blueprint without a TikTok filter. But the real kicker was the email I got that night. Subject line: Shadow plan for Kelsey. Body: starting next week, she'll begin observing you full-time so she can learn the ropes. Think of it as legacy building. You're part of the story. I stared at the screen so long the backlight dimmed. Legacy? That's when I realized something broke. Not just trust, but whatever part of me still believed loyalty would protect you. And as I closed that email, I opened another tab. An old project folder I hadn't touched in nearly 2 years. A prototype for something I once thought was too ambitious. Something that, if finished, wouldn't just make me irreplaceable. It would make me untouchable. So yeah, that shadow plan email? It wasn't just insulting. It was surgical. They were phasing me out. Cleanly. Quietly. Dress it up however you want. Legacy building. Next-gen leadership. Fresh direction. It was still the same thing. Hand over everything I've built, then get out of the way. But I didn't confront anyone. Not yet. Because here's the thing they forgot. I built the damn blueprint. Every workflow, every pricing model, every vendor escalation path. My fingerprints were on all of it. You don't erase that overnight. And definitely not by sending in someone who thought change order was a fashion term. So the following week, Kelsey started her little observation tour. And let me tell you, watching her play girl boss in my space was like watching someone wear your clothes and pretend they invented layering. She'd sit next to me in meetings, nodding like she was absorbing something profound, then ask questions so surface level they made the interns cringe. Wait, why don't we just add more tile? Wouldn't that make it look more expensive? I wish I was joking, but the worst part wasn't her incompetence. It was the way people started pretending it didn't matter. Clients began looping her in on emails. Team leads started asking her for sign-off instead of me. And Mark started calling her our future. I became invisible inside the thing I built. And yeah, it hurt. Not in a loud, dramatic way. In the quiet, brutal way that seeps in when you realize people don't remember your name, just your output. When you see your worth being transferred in real time. I told myself I'd write it out, that I'd leave gracefully, maybe handpick a new company to join, pitch my prototype, something clean. But the universe had other plans. It started with a Thursday night email from a vendor rep I've known for years. Subject: urgent, pricing discrepancy? Turns out, our system had auto-approved a bulk order for $88,000 of custom reclaimed wood panels that no one ever requested. I checked the logs. No one could have requested it. Unless... My heart dropped. That bug I patched 3 years ago, the one tied to how our database tracked material substitutions for multi-unit orders, it was back, only worse. And I knew exactly why. Kelsey had pitched streamlining the materials dashboard 2 weeks earlier. She'd handed it off to a contract dev team to refresh the interface. I warned her, twice, not to touch the logic layer. She said, "It's not that deep. Don't worry." They broke the patch. They didn't even know it was there because no one ever documented it but me. And now we were on the hook for nearly 6 figures in phantom product. I flagged the bug, wrote a report, attached it to an internal escalation memo marked URGENT. And the next morning, I was pulled into a meeting with HR. Mark was there. So was Kelsey, and a woman from legal I'd never met before. They accused me of knowingly withholding critical system vulnerabilities, said my lack of documentation put the company at risk. I sat there stunned. They were blaming me. The one who caught the bug, patched it, maintained it off the clock for 3 damn years, and now, because their nepotism project broke what she didn't understand, they wanted to make me the fall guy. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just stared at Mark as he said, "We're going to need your full cooperation in the transition plan. You'll remain on payroll through the end of the month." Like a severance was supposed to feel like mercy. I walked out of that room with my spine straight and my hands shaking. And you know what I did next? I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't blast them online. I opened my prototype folder, because while they were busy building a pretty facade, I'd been quietly building the foundation for something real. And what they didn't know was that the prototype was already live, in beta, with paying clients, under a different name. And one of those clients was their biggest competitor, the one who just submitted a bid on a project Kelsey's been bragging about landing. Yeah, that's where this story turns. Stay tuned. I didn't sleep that night. Not even a little. I sat at my kitchen table, lights off, just the glow of my laptop and that god-awful sticky note still crumpled in my coat pocket. Stay in touch? Kelsey. It was almost funny. Almost. Because while she was sipping cocktails at some rooftop mixer, I was combing through 3 years of back-end logs, trying to figure out how deep the damage went. And the answer? Deeper than I ever imagined. The bug wasn't just back. It had mutated. Turns out, someone from her contracted dev team had tried to clean up the legacy code I wrote. But instead of isolating the logic, they nuked the patch entirely and replaced it with something pulled from a GitHub forum. I wish I was exaggerating. The system had been silently duplicating product orders for weeks. Dozens of projects. Thousands of dollars. And no one noticed because the dashboard still looked polished. Form over function. That was the new religion. I should have let them crash. Should have walked away and watched it all burn from the sidelines. But I didn't. I stayed up until 4:17 a.m. rebuilding the patch. Not for them. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. Not HR, not Kelsey. Not even the 3 junior designers who still swung by my desk to ask for feedback. Quietly, like it was something shameful. I just kept showing up. Same calm face, same steady tone. They thought they'd broken me. What they didn't know? I'd already signed my partnership contract with Axis Form Labs 3 nights earlier. And every time I sat through another one of Kelsey's vision syncs, where she'd slap a mood board on the screen and call it strategy, I wasn't listening. I was building. Quietly, methodically on the other tab of my laptop. One system at a time. I wasn't sabotaging. I was extracting. See, I knew what was coming. The systems I built weren't plug and play. They weren't just code. They ran on logic, feedback loops, and human judgment. And when you remove the person who knows how those loops behave under stress, you don't get innovation. You get a slow, controlled collapse. By week 2, I'd documented every process they thought was theirs: budgeting algorithms, supplier queue automations, client retention scores linked to UX behavior. None of it was proprietary, because none of it had ever been registered. Except now? Now it was. Filed under a new name, with my name, with legal counsel and time-stamped logs. I wasn't just walking away. I was walking away with receipts. But the final nail? That came on a Monday morning. One of those fake, cheerful, all-hands meetings where everyone pretends cold brew and free croissants make up for terrible management. Kelsey stood at the front of the room, bright-eyed, backlit by a projector screen showing my original onboarding flowchart, color-swapped, watered down, labeled Kelsey's 5-step framework. I didn't flinch. I just waited, because I knew what was coming next. I'd scheduled a delayed email to go out to 4 people that morning. Our largest retained client, our lead materials vendor, the project manager who'd once covered for me during a family emergency, and Mark. The subject line? Clarification of intellectual property rights and pending transition. Inside was a letter, formal, concise, stating that I was the registered creator of the original design automation framework. That the version currently used by the firm contained components covered by my filing, and that I had accepted a leadership role at a competing firm now deploying that same platform, enterprise-wide. I didn't accuse. I didn't threaten. I just informed. 10 minutes later, Mark stormed out of the meeting. 15 minutes after that, I was summoned to legal. I declined. Told them I was on my lunch break. Walked to my car, parked 2 blocks down, sat behind the wheel, and just breathed. For the first time in months, my hands weren't shaking. But the twist? Oh, the twist was waiting for me when I got home. A voicemail from Elena Madsen. You probably don't know that name unless you're in the industry, but she's the design lead for the Hudson Housing Collective in New York. Biggest nonprofit modular housing initiative on the East Coast. She said, Lana, I've been reviewing the Axis Form beta, and I have to say, it's one of the most adaptive, ethical, and scalable solutions I've seen in a decade. We'd like to bring you on as a strategic advisor for our expansion. The board is ready to move quickly if you are. I sat there, phone still in my hand, as her words repeated in my ears like music I didn't even know I needed to hear. Ethical, scalable, advisor. I went from being cut out of my own house to being asked to help build homes for thousands. That night, as I updated my LinkedIn for the first time in years, I got one final message from Kelsey. Just 2 words. Not cool. I stared at it, laughed, didn't reply. Because here's the thing. You don't get to bury someone, then get mad when they grow roots somewhere else. If you've ever been told to make yourself small, to hand over what you built because someone louder claimed it, You're not alone. You're not crazy for walking away. And you're damn sure not weak for wanting more. Stick around. The final part's coming. And trust me, they haven't seen anything yet. 6 months. That's how long it took for everything to implode. 6 months since I handed in my resignation. Since I stepped out of that office for the last time with nothing but a flash drive, a patent certificate, and the quiet kind of rage that doesn't scream. It builds. And now? I was sitting in a glass-walled conference room overlooking Lake Michigan, sipping coffee while a full-page ad in Interior Strategies Monthly stared up at me from the table. It read, Axis Form Labs secures federal housing contract with game-changing design platform, powered by the Ortiz framework. My name, in print, next to the word game-changing. I wasn't even done smiling when my phone buzzed. Tariq, my old coworker from Westlake. They're falling apart. Audit hit them this morning. I think they're trying to pin the whole Kelsey mess on you, but Mark's name is all over the purchase orders. Audit? I blinked. Then another text, this time from Althea, who now sat on Axis Form's board. FYI, Westlake just tried to license your platform through a shell account. Didn't realize it was registered under your name. That was it. I leaned back, staring out at the water, letting the weight of it settle. They didn't just try to erase me. They tried to rebuild me in their image, without ever learning how the structure worked. And now, the cracks had caught up. Turns out those duplicate inventory errors, the ones they tried to blame on me before I left? Yeah, there were dozens more. Kelsey had authorized over $400,000 in misrouted materials because she didn't understand the override functions. Then came the breach. A contractor flagged unauthorized access to my prototype code, the one I'd filed under Ortiz Adaptive Logic. They'd downloaded the legacy version to use in their in-house rebuild, without permission. And in trying to modernize the system, they'd inadvertently tripped multiple compliance flags. HIPAA, vendor data, client IP exposure. It went beyond embarrassing. It went legal. I wasn't the one who sued, but I didn't stop the firm that did. And when the story finally hit the press, when the architect's ledger ran the headline, Westlake's collapse, innovation, nepotism, and the cost of silencing talent, there was no more spin left to throw. Kelsey? Gone. Quiet. Her LinkedIn Director of Innovation title now reads simply Creative Consultant. Mark? Stepped down for personal reasons, which I'm sure included a very personal letter from the Department of Trade Compliance. And me? I got promoted again. EVP, now. But titles don't really matter anymore. What matters is the way people look at me when I walk into a room. Not like I'm a background character. Not like I'm too serious or not a culture fit. They look at me like someone who built something that couldn't be ignored, even when people tried their hardest to ignore it. I didn't yell. I didn't fight dirty. I didn't play politics. I just made sure everything I touched was strong enough to outlast the noise. And in the end, it did. Because sometimes the loudest revenge is showing up where they never thought you'd belong, and realizing it's where you always deserve to be. The lesson I took away? Don't let their comfort with mediocrity shrink your brilliance. You don't need their validation. You need your own foundation. If any part of this felt like your story, like you've been made small, silenced, or sidelined, drop a comment. I want to hear it. And if you're still rebuilding yourself, piece by piece, you're not alone. We're building something real here. And the next story might just be yours.